feeling like a bit of a fraud, actually. So I'm actually doing a 3-month project with West Midlands Trains at the moment, and that's to overhaul their entire social media strategy. So what I'm actually here to do is talk more about Virgin Trains. I think a few of you have mentioned them today, in terms of their social landscape. So I was there from the very first tweet that we sent out, right through till about September 2017. More so, and more prominently recently, was Yopa Property Limited. Talked briefly about live chat, and then some of the cool work that we're due to embark on with West Midlands Trains, hopefully. So, yeah, hopefully you'll stick around for this one. But as I said, I'll try and make it as quick as possible. So, I think it's quite hard to believe. I think we was talking about in the police and trying to harp onto businesses about 10 years ago, trying to instill social media into the world of policing. But I think that's like many organisations. So in train world, we were very similar. So 2019 was when we embarked on that journey. And what that very first tweet looked like was, can you please email us to log your complaint, which feels really bizarre and weird now, but not really understanding social media. And what you could achieve at that date was that's how we started and how we learned, really. In terms of the actual capacity of how we want to create that online presence, we treated it like a radio show. So we built our team out of our customer relations function, and we were 9 till 5, Monday to Friday. Because obviously the social media world, we didn't know it was 24/7 at that point. So it was very much, hi, it's Rich here today. I'm here 8 till 3. Come and keep me company. We were talking about the weather earlier. Isn't it fantastic today? But, that's how we started to embrace and communicate with our online community. Not really knowing what we're doing, and almost a victim of our own success, we started to do some follow and retweet competitions, for those who remember what they were. Like for this, you can win a pencil or a ruler or whatever it was, in terms of, it's amazing what you can give away as a Virgin brand, and people really want it and engage with you. But pencils and rulers seem to be the given competition prize, if you will. But given that demand and the operation of the railway, we were, or Virgin Trains are, the last train is in service at about 2 o'clock in the morning and starts at 4 o'clock again. So in effect, are a 24/7 business. And so essentially we needed to start to meet the needs of our customers. So much so you'd have those where the delayed services at the end of the night didn't really understand where their onward transport would come from, or they're going into London, how do I get the next tube, or communicate about the night bus or whatever it might be. So we make that conscious decision where, although social media grew out of a customer relations function, at this point we didn't really understand marketing, we didn't really understand what it was like to move into an operational world, but we did it anyway. We Virgin, we was kind of like, what's the worst that can happen? And actually, it proved very successful. So we started our journey having somebody in customer relations and somebody in our control team, so that when disruption hit or things hit the fan, we've got somebody in control who can tweet out in real time what's happening from a broadcast perspective. And we had somebody in customer relations that understood our tone of voice and can communicate in real time. So much so, we were the first train operator to go 24/7, and the first train operator to encroach in a world where moving into our control team was unheard of back then. Wasn't deemed the norm. It was very archaic ways of thinking. Bringing in a brand such as Virgin, the tone of voice, the culture, the excitement into an operational world wasn't deemed the norm, but pleased to say we did it anyway, and it was successful and it worked. We then kind of looked at the kind of whole landscape of social media and what that customer journey looked like across all of our digital channels, but for me, more prominently was our social media offering. Where did it sit? Should it be an operational function? Should it be customer relations? And we trialled and tested various different methods moving into communications. The years of saying to the business, where should the social media team fit? Actually, what worked for us was we were an integral part of everybody's life within the business without them realising. So although we were under the corporate affairs umbrella, we soon started to understand things like PR, SEO, CRM, news, media, internal communications. You've still got your customer relations, marketing, and bringing it all together that actually I'd still to this day be specific that social media is its own entity. It deserves its own team, and as long as your processes are right internally, and you get that, you kind of bash down doors, if you will, and start speaking to people, which feels really weird. That as long as that process is in place, that will really work for anyone's social media team. I'm not here to talk as an expert or a guru, as some call it. It's just more what I've learned across my journey in social media. So we've got the team set up. We've bashed down those doors. We've got the internal processes ironed out. Leaning on the Virgin brand, it was then kind of getting the right people in the right job. So a bit like many of the speakers have talked about, we still had people that didn't really understand social media, didn't want to work in social media. I know Matt talked about the whole kind of culture and atmosphere and the cancerous people. There wasn't so much cancerous, it was just more they're doing social media for the sake of doing social media because they've been put in that role. And so very quickly I'm not saying we dealt with them, it sounds really horrible, but I think in terms of that recruitment, it was either upskilling our people and making sure ultimately they come to work with a smile on their face and they wanted to work for the brand. But not only the brand, it was more day in, day out, communicate with the 1,400 people that we'd have tweeting us continually day in, day out, that's disruption aside, and want to make a difference in a customer's journey. And so we did a big piece of work in terms of that ideal customer experience, and what we really instilled in our people was the team understanding where on a customer's journey they were, to not only talk about whatever query or question they might have, but also educate the customer in terms of their next onward decision making. So it could be somebody at a station asking about a particular ticket, but we know they're at the station, we know they're talking about a particular ticket, give them the information, but then it's also about what you can do at that station and start to build that relationship and communication in a two-way fashion as you would talking with friends or family. Just embarking on that, the Virgin Trains journey there, we used numerous platforms, and I'm kind of well averse to about 10 or 12 of them. In terms of at the time when I was certainly there, I said I left in September 17, but we were using the old Social Sign or New Brand Orlo, and the platform itself allowed us to not only create those online communities, but also deal with customers in real time. So we used a lot of streams, we used a lot of keyword searches to make sure that those in disruption potentially were answered in a timely fashion, because they're the ones potentially in distress. And one example that springs to mind is Storm Doris. That day alone, it may sound like a lot or not to some people, but 8,000 tweets within a 24-hour period from that first kicking off. No best will in the world, no team's going to be resourced enough to combat that. However, pleased to say we did reply to 80% of those customers that were distressed within that first 24-hour period. And again, I think that was a huge credit to having the right people, having the right tools available to us, speaking to the right departments and processes, and just making sure that ultimately, and it might sound really corny to most people, but putting customers at the heart of everything you do really does work. So in terms of content, and I thought that was quite a good analogy that people would phone the police to say about the toilet roll. I've just talked a bit about there in terms of the team, the structure, how we built that online community. It allowed us to start to have fun with our audience. And the most prominent one that may or may not know about it is something called Poo Gate, or hashtag Poo Gate. So those that don't know about it, we had a young boy that was in his hour of need, and found himself in a position where there was no loo roll in one of the toilets on the trains. Lo and behold, he took to the power of social media to express the fact that he needed some loo roll in his toilet. And as we were sitting in control, we were able to call the train manager, get some toilet roll down, and he left, washed his hands hopefully, and we thought that was the story, that was it. We was using social media for what we thought social media was for. Unbeknown to us, he was quite an influential blogger. Genuinely, the story itself escalated and got picked up later on, and lo and behold, the story itself, Twitter themselves did a case study on that as to how best use of social media. So again, it was a huge credit for us being there in the moment and helping someone out in their hour of need. Fortunately, they didn't call the police, which has saved you a job, so I'll charge you later. In terms of understanding online communities then, so we've got a huge football fan base, and being Virgin, we tended to lean on that. So I know LinkedIn, I may be a bit contradictory here in terms of that newsjacking experience, but Virgin Trains, we're always looking at new ways to put ourselves in trending hashtags or something that's very current, and just being renowned for being fantastic at our customer service offering. Again, Matt, I'm going to pick on you because you're a City fan, but we've got a couple of examples here in terms of a Man United game where it was a local derby. One of the players got sent off, which was Chris Smalling, and using our tongue-in-cheek humour, was able to go out with a tweet that said, "Hi, Chris Smalling, looking for a one-way ticket out of Manchester. We've got tickets to London, Euston from £12.50, one way, of course." So the embarrassment of a footballer getting sent off in a local derby is quite unheard of, I guess. Well, it happens quite a lot now, but it was just using the power of social media again to kind of have a bit of brand fun and fame there. And on the right-hand side, those that can't see, this was a young girl that had actually tweeted into us via her mum and written War and Peace on Facebook about how awful our first-class offering was. And she thought we should have crab sandwiches and jelly and ice cream and lobster, I think, at one point. So we, lo and behold, through the power of social media again, we designed her on-board menu and allowed her to come and travel with us, experiencing her menu. And one of the products, I can't remember which one it was, it's 2 years ago now, a lot's changed since then, we actually kept it on the menu purposely for her. So I think that, again, that was a great use of the ways in which we used to, well, they still do use social media. And lastly, on the Virgin Trains section was more the crisis communication. So we, as a train world, very operational. We know things go wrong. Most of you probably travelled in by train today and was probably disrupted or delayed or just annoyed with train companies, I think. Things do go wrong, but fortunately for us, as Virgin Trains, we're able to, irrespective of the situation or the operational incident, we always had, again, the right people to be able and trained to combat those bad situations. So we'd have teams that would go into broadcast mode, we'd have someone on Facebook, we'd have someone on Twitter, and we're able to deal with an incident very quickly. And the biggest thing for us when we used to go into broadcast mode was very much give customers as much information as possible to self-serve themselves, which will hopefully prohibit them from actually contacting us. But if they do, still keep that reputational online experience a great one. So even during disruption, our response times on Twitter were 5 minutes and Facebook 15 minutes respectively. And again, that was just huge credit to the team, but as well as the tools, platforms and kit that we had available to us was second to none and allowed us to give customers that experience. Moving into Yopa Property Limited then. So I left Virgin Trains and embarked on a new journey with a startup company. They're a hybrid estate agent that are very much digital and online, but still have your own local Yopa agent that would come and value your property. Within that role, so I was head of customer happiness, so that's essentially why I left, because it was a cool job title. But also, it was a new challenge for me, having worked in customer relations backgrounds of web and live chat, email, contact centres and more so social, I went back to kind of my roots in terms of establishing a new resolution centre, giving customers the ideal experience when things do go wrong. We brought in a new social media team, so they had a head of social media, but leaning really on my strengths of customer care, was able to bring in that. But more prominently, what we noticed online was twofold. Was when you visit the website, it wasn't a slick, finished engage. So you'd go through numerous pages in which to book your valuation for people, for an agent to come out and see your property. And unbeknown to us, the conversion rate was really low. And so what we essentially brainstormed was that it was a critical point where at click 4, let's say, the drop-off rate was so high, and I think it was mainly because customers at that point actually thought they were selling their property. They thought they're clicking a button not to book a valuation, but actually, I'm about to commit the biggest asset you'll probably ever own. I'm about to sell it by a click of a button online, and so people would hold back, and as a result of that, was able to bring in live chat within that customer journey to make sure that at click 4, we've got people on hand to answer any questions that people might have and reassure them they're not about to sell their property. And in fact, it was to get an agent out to your property to value it and make your own conscious decision whether you want to move house, sell, or whatever it might be. But again, in terms of live chat, I think it's that building that community online, that people become accustomed to the fact that you are present, giving them that option. And as I said, for us, it boosted that conversion rate, which hopefully, inevitably, I'm not saying everything's about sales, but will lead to more properties on the market. So, leaning on all of that, as I said, I'm trying to speed through this a bit if I can. I find myself back in the railway, and on a really exciting 3-month project to help shape their social media strategy. So, West Midlands Trains are broken down into 2 brands. So you've got West Midlands Railway and London North Western Railway, and so it's understanding the tone of voice of each brand. And enhancing what they've already created. So they're only a year into their franchise. They took over from the old London Midland. So there's a lot that has been transferred across. However, they've got quite an exciting journey or path to embark on at the moment. For me, it's looking at that end-to-end customer journey and making sure that social, as I said about Virgin Trains there, it's such an integral part of their business. It's not only educating the business what can be achieved through social media, but also meeting the tone of voice, the brand values, and making sure that ideal customer experience is adhered to. The internal stakeholders, as I identified earlier, they do work very much in silos. So for me, this 3-month project, or thus far, has been very much speaking to every single stakeholder and making sure they're, without knowing, they play a huge part in social media and what the team could essentially achieve. So the reason I've kind of brought in that live chat function is that the exciting part of where they're at the moment is, and as I said, for me, it's all based on recommendations for West Midlands Trains, but is there that landscape to potentially have a more digital team that looks at the more online live chat experience, social media, even bringing in instantaneous email? What does that look like? I think I'd scare him if I started talking about bots and AI, to be honest. But the strategy that I'll be putting together will very much outline what could be achieved. And as I said there, in terms of for my personal sanity, I think we've in the digital world, we've cried out for somewhere or something that can help shape your social and live chat experience. And I'm quite excited to start working with Orlo to see if that's something that can kind of really enhance what not only West Midlands Railway can do, but potentially change the future landscape of how teams work essentially internally. So I think that's a bit from me. As I said, I tried to whistle through that a bit quickly, but as I said, for me, it's about building that online presence, that community, understanding your customer, bringing in digital channels that are fit for purpose and do what they want them to do. But I'm quite keen, I said in the break, to speak to every one of you to talk about your journeys, to see if there's any ideas I can steal from you that's going to help me with my strategy. So come and find me. And as I said at the start, any of that you didn't understand, I'll try and translate when we do meet up. But I'd like to thank everyone and all the speakers for your time today. And I'll hand you over to Stuart.
Cheers. Thank you, Rich.